Hi, welcome to our monthly chats with Dr. Alan Dieterich-Ward. Thank you, Alan, for being here. We've been meeting monthly to talk about Alan's book, Cradle of Conservation, but today we thought we'd take a little bit different approach and look at what inspired the book, and that is the long-term project of the Pennsylvania Conservation Heritage Project. As always, if you have any comments or questions throughout the conversation, put them in the comment box and I'll be watching that, and we'll make sure that Alan sees those and can answer your question.
Yep.
So we're going to jump right in, keeping track of the time. So Alan, you want me to bring up the presentation?
Sounds great, Marcy. Hi, everyone. It is awesome to welcome you to another installment of our conversation series on the Pennsylvania Conservation Heritage Project. As a reminder, I'm Alan Dieterich-Ward. My one paid job is to be a professor of history and director of the graduate school here at Shippensburg University. And I've been active with Marcy. I've been co-chair for the last couple of years of the Pennsylvania Conservation Heritage Project. And so Marcy and I, we talked last month about sort of my next project, kind of coming out of the Cradle of Conservation, the book, and also connected to the Conservation Heritage Project, and that is this extensive oral history series of environmental regulation in Pennsylvania, beginning with the strike force, the division of the regulatory unit within the Department of Environmental Resources that really launched the environmental revolution in Pennsylvania. And so for this month, we decided, instead of looking forward, we're going to look to the near past, just to give everyone a clear sense of what the Pennsylvania Conservation Heritage Project is, where it came from, and to have an ask for all of those of you who are listening, either today or who are going to be listening in the coming months or even years, to get involved with the Conservation Heritage Project itself. So Marcy is going to be our interviewee in a sense, because she was involved with the Conservation Heritage Project from the very, very start. I joined a few years later, and so we're going to dig back into her brain a little bit. And we're going to start out by talking about sort of the origins of this, and it actually originated with a focus on one man, on Maurice Goddard, the father of Pennsylvania state parks, who was a long-term secretary for 20-some years under multiple administrations, Republican and Democratic, really created the modern era of environmental protection and conservation in Pennsylvania while he was secretary first to the Department of Forests and Waters, and then reluctantly the secretary for the beginning decade of the Department of Environmental Resources, this super agency that was formed in 1970. Now, Goddard died in the mid 1990s, and many of the folks who had served with him over the course of 25 years felt that his contributions to Pennsylvania state government, to conservation, to environmentalism, that they felt that they were worried that that his legacy be preserved and be maintained. And so a group of these folks who worked with him, including Brenda Barrett, including Wayne Kober, including Bill Forey, the longtime state parks director, came together and sort of gelled around this notion of preserving Maurice Goddard's legacy. They succeeded in doing some oral histories and some kind of capturing stories of Goddard himself. They had historical markers, at least one, as I recall, installed, sort of celebrating Goddard or enshrining Goddard. Marcy, what else did the Goddard Legacy Project? What were the other accomplishments of the Goddard Legacy Project?
So I will say that there was one official PHMC historic marker, which is at the Rachel Carson State Office Building. There were others that we created that were placed in meaningful locations, like one here in Camp Hill where Goddard lived, one on the Delaware Canal. So a few relating to projects. Just because we knew that not everybody would be in Center City, Harrisburg to see that plaque. There was also 25 parks that received interpretive panels about his work that were placed in areas with scenic overlooks. But it really inspired creating a documentary about Goddard's life and work. And that is available on the Conservation Heritage Project website, along with curriculum on how to utilize the documentary in a classroom and dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, and I want to. Oh, sorry, Marcy, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and it all started with, as you said, these people coming together. But we had a walk on the Goddard Legacy Trail in Camp Hill, and a lot of people came out that had a lot of memories that wanted to showcase his work, and that really informed the fact that a lot of these stories hadn't been captured, which was the growth of the Conservation Heritage Project.
Yeah, and where I sort of initially got involved in a little bit of piece of this, I grew to know Brenda Barrett, who was just an absolute force of nature, no pun intended. And I first learned of the Goddard Legacy Project in talking with Brenda. And my little piece of this is that back in 2012, I edited a special issue of the journal Pennsylvania History, and Brenda actually contributed the article kind of focusing on the Goddard Legacy Project. So if you get a chance to read it, it's called How to Make History Matter, the Maurice K. Goddard Legacy Project. And so that's sort of where I got connected in with this. And as Marcy noted, what we're really kind of doing here is taking you through the different phases of the Conservation Heritage Project, but also then pointing you to these different elements of the website that originated during this period and has evolved to kind of encapsulate all of the different pieces of it. So you were just starting to talk about the documentary a little bit, Marcy.
Yeah, I was mentioning it's an amazing hour-long documentary. We did it in partnership with WITF, sponsored by a number of different foundations and the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. And there are resources on the website to not only, you can view the documentary there. If you're a teacher, you can request a copy if you don't have access to the internet to show it, but how to utilize it in your classroom. The idea behind it wasn't for it to not be static, but for it to be an inspiration to others. And I enjoy the documentary. I always get a little tearful having had a little bit of overlap with Goddard in my career. And there's a point in the documentary where he speaks, and he had a very booming voice, a very distinct voice, and that always chokes me up. So he had, he really had the vision of a state park within 25 miles of every resident, and that our parks and forests should be free so that everybody would have the opportunity to enjoy them. So that's really, you'll have to dig in more. We don't want to give all of it to you. And, we want you to take a peek at the website, but, dig deep into some of these documentaries and these resources that are on the website.
Well, and that gets us to the next phase, and that is this group of folks that came together, including Marcy at this point, to celebrate and to educate about Goddard, really got to thinking not just about the past, but looking at how can the lesson of Goddard and Maurice Goddard's leadership, his professionalism, his bipartisanship. Remember, this was a moment around 2008 or so, just as the Marcellus shale boom was happening. And there were a lot of changes underway in Pennsylvania, some of which the folks who were rallying around Goddard's legacy were really concerned about. We're concerned that the state legislature, we're concerned that the governor were moving away from what they felt was the environmental heritage of Pennsylvania's leadership. And so as they sort of wrapped up this documentary, wrapped up this storytelling around Goddard, they looked to see, okay, what is the more broad approach that we can take to this? Not just the Goddard Legacy Project, but the Conservation Heritage Project. And so around 2010 or so, this initial focus on Goddard begins to expand more broadly to wanting to tell the story of this conservation leadership, of, dare I say, the cradle of conservation over the bigger term. Now, and this was happening just at the time as Pennsylvania's Department of Natural Resources, DCNR, was rolling out its conservation landscape initiatives. So there was this real attention to the ways in which landscape and conservation in these distinct landscapes across the state could provide a model for bipartisan, for community-based conservation going forward. And I think, Marcy, that's really the origin of this broader approach to the Conservation Heritage Project. Am I thinking through that right?
Yeah, yes, you are. It was really about realizing, once as we were focusing on Goddard, that there were a lot of stories that had not been told, and that knowing the past can help inform the future. And also as a way to celebrate and perhaps inspire other people to think about conservation careers, conservation opportunities. And, you know, while the documentaries like you're showing now are some of the well-known or perhaps forgotten leaders like Myra Lloyd Dock, some of the other aspects, which we'll get to, are really about the stories of everyday people and the events or the places in our landscape that all contribute to our legacy of conservation and our legacy as Pennsylvanians.
Yeah, and this is when this is the moment kind of around 2010, 2011, where I personally kind of got involved with the Conservation Heritage Project. This was a movement of kind of great opportunity. We received grant funding, very generous grant funding from a number of different funders across the state, who, as Marcy noted, allowed us to build upon this relationship that we had with WITF to create these other documentaries, to expand beyond kind of just forests, to look at Ralph Abel and the evolution of water protection in Pennsylvania, to go back a bit farther to Gifford Pinchot and to extend that story nationwide, and then to begin to talk about environmental justice and the role of Pennsylvania in that, leading to a documentary on Chester, and then ultimately this documentary that kind of pulls it all together on Penn's Woods. And at the same time, we had members of the board of the Conservation Heritage Project Steering Committee who were looking at translating these ideas into teaching materials, into lesson plans. We have a timeline and begin. I think this is a time, Marcy, where you all begin to be exploring the use of story maps to kind of connect these stories to specific spots on the landscape. And we had the first version of our oral history project. Ken Walensky and Vagel Keller came together to develop, to kind of seek out some of our still living conservation heroes, folks like Pete Duncan and Bill Forey, who I mentioned, and other leaders of this movement. And all of that sort of made its way into this new website that the Parks and Forests Foundation sort of spearheaded. What was your goal in sort of bringing all this together in one place on this website, Marcy?
We thought it was important for people to have sort of a one-stop shop, and that, when we get to the story page, you'll see that we were trying to bring stories together to inspire people to perhaps share their own stories. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to bring it all together so that it was accessible. It was a tool for individual study, mm-hmm. but as well as a tool for classrooms of all levels. And there's no real landing page outside of this for the stories that are being generated about conservation history in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Yeah, there are some other initiatives now relating to untold stories, which we are also doing. So really seeing it as a place where people can go not just to learn, but also to share.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, and that's a great observation. I mean, one of the things that we've talked about numerous times in our conversations here, Marcy, is that Pennsylvania is this really big, really diverse place, and what happens oftentimes is that ideas and stories and initiatives that happen in one part of the state, they get siloed, right? Even within some of our state agencies, you can have initiatives that are really interesting and really of value to everyone, but but communicating them out, having a core place where kind of all of this is collected, so that folks can find it. That really was one of the things that in our conversations, 2015, 2016, 2017 came out, that we really needed a mechanism by which these stories would be generated, yes, but then also where they could be collected and maintained and then used in these for these different purposes.
Correct.
Yeah. So, and I should say that my book, The Genesis for Cradle of Conservation, sort of came out of this moment. Again, we had the documentaries, we had the raw data from our oral histories or from our collections that we did. We had the website as a distribution framework. But there was this real sense that we needed something, a longer form written format that could kind of pull everything together in a way that a more focused documentary, just a film, couldn't do. And that's really the origins of Cradle of Conservation, as a book. It took me longer than I wished it to for it to come out. And of course, you may recall there was some disruption around about late 2019 that you may recall with the pandemic. But eventually, Cradle of Conservation came out last year, and it came out at a moment now, right, where we are really thinking about how do we go about expanding the narrative, and that can happen in a number of different ways. We obviously want to continue to explore and to understand and to tell the stories of our conservation leaders, including Maurice Goddard, of course, but figuring out how to tell this broader range of stories in a state as big and diverse and with a timeline as long as we have here in Pennsylvania. That's really what we're working through now, right? And you can begin to see this in our stories page on the website and in the untold stories that are being funded through DCNR and elsewhere to begin to capture different perspectives on these events that we think we know so well. And that's, I think, really the challenge that we have for right now today of the Conservation Heritage Project.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that was a real turning point in the project where we went from telling the story through the narrative of the, I'm going to say, the green,
the big dogs, right? Yeah, the big leaders, right? Yeah.
The big leaders, and that green is the environment, to really looking at it through a variety of lenses, like the environmental justice, when we're looking at Zuline Mayfield's story of protecting her community by becoming an activist against some of the incinerators that were being put in. So really looking at it through a variety of lenses and celebrating all the contributions that people have made. Mm-hmm. Keith Russell was recently featured, his work as an African-American ornithologist in the city of Philadelphia, of not just educating other people, but focusing on, tall buildings during bird migration. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of different and interesting stories. And it was one of the stories in the project is the Denora smog. Mm-hmm. And I was recently out in Western PA and I passed the sign. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's Denora. I read the story, saw it on here. And so I think that's the other beauty of it, is it's putting context in the landscape. Yeah. We have a story ready to go up on the Quahana Trail, the history of the Quahana Trail, and all the various factors that came together to make that happen, and the very interesting history of the Quahana Wildlife Area.
Yeah.
So telling stories from so many different perspectives and remembering that, there are different perspectives.
Well, and that's not to put too fine a point on it, but that's really the trick right now for us, right? And to kind of bring this full circle back, this project started with a celebration of Maurice Goddard, and of his contributions to the state and of his legacy and of his leadership. And of course, now we've gotten to a place 15 years later where some of the stories that we're telling, Goddard is the villain, not the hero, from the perspective of the folks that we have. And of course, it's really important to understand that perspective, right? Those are and to understand that history of conservation, of environmentalism, that there are winners and losers from every public policy choice, and to simply kind of ignore the perspectives of those who are outside the mainstream, whether they're minoritized or whether their perspective doesn't win in the public policy debate, well, that can have major ramifications down the road, right? I think we're still kind of working our way through that. How do we go about simultaneously telling a story of Pennsylvania as the cradle of conservation, Pennsylvania as the story of environmental leadership, while also understanding that there is always a counter narrative to that has to be explored and understood at the same time. And I think we're really working to figure out how do we balance those things in a way that is useful.
And I would add to that is, I totally agree, is in that, when you're looking at this, you see some very old pictures, you see some more modern pictures. Another part of our perspective that has shifted is that there are people doing things today that are influencing the history going forward. So we're trying to capture those stories of people that are doing the work now, not just of people that maybe were engaged in the past.
That's right.
And there is an opportunity to submit stories about people, places, and events that shaped Pennsylvania. And so that's one of the things that you can do on the website.
That's right. I mean, and I think that's, as we kind of continue, our goal is to continue this conversation, open minds, right? To thinking through what do we need to be understanding and knowing and capturing about Pennsylvania's story today, right? Today and now, that is going to have that same influence going forward that a Myra Lloyd Dock, right, or that a Ralph Brock had in the past. How can we set the stage for expanding that narrative to these folks today?
Yes.
Because I should say, I think it's important to note the Myra Lloyd Dock story was largely forgotten, right? The Ralph Brock story was almost completely forgotten, right? At least within the mainstream, right? And so this notion that I think that's a lesson for us, again, for the here and now, that we don't want to overlook places where these important conservation and environmental stories are happening at this moment, so that we can avoid the mistakes of the past in sort of papering over or ignoring those things, as was the case with folks like Myra Lloyd Dock and Ralph Brock.
Yeah, and it's so important for us to capture these stories so that they're not lost or forgotten or erased. And I think, there are some other aspects to the website. There are some resources.
I'll go back up here. Did you want to?
Yeah, I can't read those, but there are resource pages. We mentioned the curriculum. There is the timeline, which is, starts back in Indigenous people time all the way up to last year. I don't think we added anything since then. But so there are a lot of subpages within the Conservation Heritage Project website that are worth exploring. And I did put the paconservationheritage.org URL in the chat box for folks if you want to check it out.
And I'm trying desperately to share my window, and there we go. Can you see it now? Can you see the website now?
Let me remove the one from the stage. And whoops, which one is up now? Wait,
I think
I'm gonna.
If you want to, I can share my screen.
There we go.
There we go. Now we're in business. Okay. So you wanted to, if you want to, Marcy, we could take the last couple of minutes. I don't know if there are folks in the chat or not, but if not, and if you want to talk a little bit about, go ahead.
So the timeline is in there. I don't know if you just want to, I can see it a little bit better here. And there is a printable timeline that's like 17 or 18 pages, as well as
it is in fact 35 pages.
Oh, okay, 35 pages. There is also the timeline where we pulled some key dates out as a movable visual. And there are story maps relating to different things. The Forest Legacy, Pennsylvania Parks and Forests. You can see that, what is being shared here. Myra Lloyd Dock, just trying to show places in the landscape where people worked and played. And we were also taking, like with the forestry one, taking some of the things that we were learning and creating something that if you wanted to go out and learn about the legacy of forestry in Pennsylvania, you can use the story map to guide you in your journey.
There we go. Yeah. And I'll be up this weekend, Marcy. I'll be up at the Keystone Trail Association's fall get together. So up in Ridgeway, and I'll just bet that there are aspects of the Forest Legacy Trail in that area of the Pennsylvania wilds that I can use.
Absolutely. And I know you'll be with the Susquehanna River Trail Association tomorrow night. Right. And, the river was key in Forest Legacy Trail.
Okay. We've talked about the documentaries a bit. And why don't I just pull up here to wrap us up for time for the educators, right? We have a whole set of education materials for each of those documentaries.
Yes. So there's discussion questions, there's fact sheets, there are educator guides. So, they were developed by a professional educator. So they're good tools for helping you take the documentaries and implement it into your classroom. And if you do, and you have additional ideas, please feel free to share them with us.
Yeah, that would be great.
Get them up there. And then there's a support page. If you want to support the Conservation Legacy Project, you can always make a donation to
100% true.
See it going forward.
That's right. And then the last thing I wanted to say just before we go is you mentioned the fact that if folks have stories or want to get involved, that we want that, right? And so what's the best way for folks? I would imagine you have an email address as well as the mail address. What's the best way for folks to contribute ideas, to contribute stories?
There should be I'm looking at the page. There should be on the stories page.
Okay, let's go.
There was a form that people could complete. Let's go up to the.
Oh no, it's right here. It's get involved. Get involved, right there.
There we go.
There we go. Get involved. That's where we are. Now we're in business. Yep.
Yeah. Submit a story. Take action. Host a documentary. So if you want to host a showing of a documentary, we can work with you to do a showing. So there's how you can get involved.
Yep. So click away and join us in the movement, huh?
Yeah. So this was a good refresher for us.
That's right.
Play around with the website as well. Oh, that's wild. There's us inside of us, inside of us, inside of us.
I know. Yeah. It may make sense for you to stop sharing the screen.
Too many of us.
That's right. Way too many. One is generally too many of me anyway. So there we go. So that was our kind of overview of the Conservation Heritage Project. The last more than 15 years now, and taking us right up to this moment where someone out there in our viewers is clicking on that I want to share a story right now, and you're going to be the next contributor to the Conservation Heritage Project.
Excellent. And it's hard to believe that it's been over 15 years. Wow.
I had more hair. I had more hair, Marcy, when I started.
And my hair was darker, Alan. As my brother always says, but at least you have hair.
That's I would echo your brother's sentiments.
Well, thank you, Alan. Wonderful to talk with you. Thank you for walking us through the Conservation Heritage Project website and origin. And I don't see any questions in the chat box, but if at any point you have a question, feel free to go to the website and reach out to us. Always happy to answer your questions. Or if you want to do a showing, reach out. We'll happy to work with you to show one of the documentaries and have a conversation about it.
or have me come and give a book talk.
Yes. Or yes, absolutely. Sorry. And if you want to see where Alan currently is doing book talks, there's a calendar of events on the website, so you can see them there.
As Marcy noted, and starting today, Marcy, I have 4 book talks in 6 days. So I've got busy stuff. Next one, of course, is tomorrow night at Fort Hunter with our water trail folks, which I'm excited about.
Yes, excellent. Well, great. Well, thank you, Alan. Thank you all. Enjoy your day. Bye.